American history. You've heard this a lot over the course of this coverage, but my next guest argues that the past few weeks have actually been the best of Trump's presidency. Not despite impeachment, but because of it to some extent. Marc Thiessen writes in the Washington Post, the economy is humming, Trump's accomplishments are accumulating, and impeachment is backfiring. And that makes these the best weeks of Trump's presidency so far. Marc Thiessen joins me now. He is the co-host of the American Enterprise Institute's What the Hell's Going On podcast and a Fox News contributor. Marc, always good to see you.
Good to be with you, Martha.
I'm sure there's, a lot of folks in the country who look at your headline and say, what the hell's going on? How could you think that?
Well, here's what the hell's going on. Look, let's just look at the legislative accomplishments. So for the past 12 months, Nancy Pelosi and the House Democrats have basically been stonewalling President Trump's legislative priorities. Then all of a sudden, in the last week or so, the legislative dam is broken. They agreed to pass the USMCA trade deal with Mexico and Canada, which he's been pushing for them to do for months. They agreed to do a spending bill to avert a government shutdown. They agreed to pass a defense bill that creates his Space Force, that has federal parental leave, that has and doesn't put any restrictions on the border wall. Remember the big fight about the border wall? Yeah. And they also passed a tax bill. They're agreed to a tax bill. It hasn't passed. It's passing in the Senate, not yet in the House, but they've agreed to a tax bill that repeals 3 Obamacare taxes, further dismantling the Affordable Care Act. How did that suddenly happen? What's the difference between the past week and the past 12 months? And the answer is impeachment. Impeachment's the difference. These Democrats see the polls showing that Americans think that they're focused on impeachment at the expense of getting things done for the American people, and especially the voters like the voter you had on just a few minutes ago, who thinks that the Democrats are trying to take away their vote and are not doing the things that they sent them to Washington to do. And so these Democrats, these vulnerable Democrats, are desperate to show that they're working with the president.
So if that's true, if what you say is true, I mean, a lot of those are facts, obviously. Yeah. But do you think Nancy Pelosi sits back? Her instincts were, right, that she shouldn't do this, that it would be divisive for the country. Then she got sort of put into, sort of jammed into a position where she kind of had to move forward. And then she kept saying, it's a republic only if you can keep it. And, it was just this somber, serious, sad moment. And she didn't have any choice. Do you think she regrets it now?
Well, I think she was right the first time when she said that, she was right a few months ago, and the Democrats should have listened to her when she said that unless you have something that's so unanimous and bipartisan that it can be passed with a bipartisan majority, you shouldn't pursue impeachment. I mean, look, impeachment has backfired on the Democrats horribly. If you just look at the polls, the support for impeachment has dropped, and the polls are showing that before impeachment, Trump was losing to most of the Democrats in national polls, his possible Democrat. Now he's beating them, and now his approval numbers are sort of matching their highs. They're never absolutely.
They're I think at 43%. I wonder if it would have been, just purely politically, right, for them, would it have been better for them to have dragged this thing out as long as possible, to have gone to the courts, to have said we want John Bolton, we want Mick Mulvaney, and just sort of keep it in the bloodstream while they pass some of these other things and while they let it go? Jamming it sort of through in the House side, put them in this, very difficult position where a lot of folks look at it and they go, well, I don't even know what's going on, and I'm not sure why we're doing this.
Well, they're in the worst of both worlds because they're taking on an issue which is probably the most serious constitutional process you can take, which is impeachment, and they're doing it in a way that shows that they're not serious, that it's political. They're impeaching, one of the 2 articles of impeachment is impeaching the president for obstruction of Congress. They're Article 1 of the Constitution. He's Article 2. Article 1 is not superior to Article 2, and he's appealed to Article 3, the judiciary. How can you impeach the president for going to the courts to adjudicate whether executive privilege is valid or not?
I mean,
it's just ridiculous.
Let me ask you this, because, looking back at Clinton and looking back at Nixon, there was a feeling in the country that I think sort of matched the sentiment that Nancy Pelosi talks about. It was dramatic. It was upsetting. It was unnerving. Yeah. People were, it was just, it just left everyone feeling sick, I think. This, I just talked to Rick Grinnell. He's like, can I tell you something? Nobody ever asks me one thing about the impeachment that's going on in America. And I hear it all the time. People say, no one's talking about it when they go out campaigning. No one's talking about it out there. I mean, that's weird, Mark.
This is a story in the liberal coastal elite bubble. In the rest of the country, they want to know, what are we doing on prescription drugs? What are we doing on trade? What are we doing on all these different things? And so when, we do this wall-to-wall coverage of the impeachment hearings because it's news and it's history and it has to be covered, right?
Absolutely.
But when Americans look at that, we all sit around and debate, did they score a point against the president? How did the president come out? Yeah. They look at that and say, you're not focused on the right thing. You're spending all your time impeaching the president over something we don't think is impeachable instead of getting things done for the American people. This week, Trump, because they went down this path,
I think it changes impeachment forever. I think it just becomes a political weapon. We're going to see it all the time. Mark, I got to go. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Martha.
That's the story of December.